Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon tank, and tonight we're going to do a big water change, remove a lot of the plants. I'm going to wipe down the glass, and I don't know, I'm going to get in there and do as much maintenance as I can on it tonight. So we're going to do a before and after video. This is going to be your before look, and I think tonight we're going to get in there and do a little bit of during video as well. I've got some of that green, I guess it's a cyanobacteria. It's like a green film slime that grows across the surface of stuff, especially up where it gets really intense light. And it's basically created a sheeting sort of effect over my woodwork in the center there. And it's actually starting to get onto the roots of the Java fern that you can see there flowing in the breeze. So I'm going to get in there with my little siphon, and we're going to siphon that out, and hopefully I'm going to be able to use my head cam and we'll be able to get a little bit of video of that. But now that I'm looking around, I can see more and more of it on the tips of most of the Java fern. Again, when you get up close to the top of the tank where the light is really intense is where you see the growth of that. But at any rate, we'll get to that when we get into doing the actual maintenance itself. Probably not going to mess with the filter tonight. I don't really have time for that, but I do need to get the water change done, and while the water's draining with my main siphon hose, I may as well get in there and use my little siphon hose that's just a straight siphon hose. It doesn't have the larger end like the gravel vac does that sort of reduces the amount of suction and prevents fish from getting drawn up in there, and of course allows you to vac your gravel without sucking the gravel right out of your tank. The hose I'm going to use for this is not a hose like that. It's just going to be a vinyl tube, but it's going to be fairly narrow, so that'll give me a good amount of suction over a very small area, and we can sort of spot clean all that stuff off. And I'm hoping it should just come off in big sheets, and it should be really easy to clear out of there. But again, we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a good long digestion of your before. Alright everybody, I hope I got this camera angled right, because we only got one shot at this. So if we look in here, I don't know how well this is going to come out on the camera, but you can definitely see up here that really dark green sheeting. I did have it all over this piece of woodwork here, but it seems to be gone. I wonder if it's actually a big sheet of it is not broken loose somewhere and is now floating around in the tank. But you can see almost all of this has a lot of thick stuff growing on it too, so we'll have to get in there and thin that out. We'll definitely be getting in here and thinning out a lot of that vegetation. So you can see all the way down here we've got it. I got it growing on the stuff here, so there's no way we're going to get it all out of there. Honestly, I probably should have pulled the vegetation out of there first, so let's start working on that. You know, I think I'm probably just going to pull all of this out of here and just call it contaminated and get rid of it. I mean, you can see sheets of that stuff. So it's definitely abundant in here. Now, of course, I just moved the whole thing over. So, alright, now what are we looking at here? I think that was it for the water sprite that was in there. Good thing about this stuff is it comes out really easily. So let's do this with the water sprite then. See all that thick green stuff there? That's all just got to come out. So this whole big mass is going to come out. We'll find ourselves a nice good young'un there, and yes, I can see it's got all that stuff all over it. That's just going to have to be there. It's in this tank. There's nothing I can do about it. But all of this is going to come out of there. We're just going to start over. And even some of this can come out too, since it's got so much of that on there. I guess I should have stopped the filter. Although, actually now that I got my garden tank area set up over here, I'm not sure where it is anymore. When you get these sun filters, you'll get little plastic caps that you can put down over the what do you call that thing, the surface skimmer. And by doing that, it doesn't suck air through the top, and you can actually let the water level come down quite low and leave the filter running. I can't find where those caps are, so we're going to have to go ahead and turn the filter off. Again, I'm not going to do a filter change at the moment, but we are going to get it turned off while I get in there and do a little of this mechanical vacuum here. So let's do this now. The only problem is once I get these fern roots started, it's hard to get them out. I could probably do with trimming those fern roots up a little bit. Yeah, see, I just keep pulling them out with me. Alright, we're going to call that round one. Now I got to go upstairs and dump this outside because of all the vegetation there. I'm not going to pour that down the toilet, but you got the idea. I'm just going to do that a couple more times. We'll get down here. We'll try to clear some of that stuff out, and then I'm going to get in here and really reduce this fern. In fact, I've got some Wendetti growing right here. It's actually growing pretty dense and thick, and it's grown onto the roof of the woodwork here. So I think I might just pull this whole mass, because this isn't attached to anything. This is just a chunk of floating fern. So once again, I'm going to say I've got Java fern for sale. Now obviously you should be aware that it does have, you know, some of that green stuff growing on it coming out of this tank, but I got lots of little babies in there, and then of course I've got this massive chunk. If somebody wanted that whole entire chunk, we could talk some, you know, we'd work something out. I wouldn't be able to ship this under my normal package, but we could work something out. So check my email below. I've just about always got Java fern and water sprite for sale. I'm not going to put this in that bucket because I don't want to further contaminate it anymore, but this is about to come out. We'll stick this in another bucket in the other room. But there you go. That's the wad of Java fern. That we're going to go do something with. Maybe if nobody wants that, I'll put that in the native tank or something, and we'll see what happens to it in there. In the meantime, as I said, I'm going to go dump that bucket. We're going to get back in here and do another round. I'll get the glass wiped down, all that good stuff, and then we'll come back and we'll do the after. This actually looks like a uprooted Apanagitan. It sure enough is. Now I don't know if that came up. No, it didn't come uprooted, so this must be a new one that has just been floating in the tank, and I didn't even notice it. When I moved all that around, this Apanagitan came loose. So who knows what's in that mass. But I now have another Apanagitan that we can do something with, so for now we'll just throw that back in the tank too. And again, when I get done outside, we'll get back down in here, and I'm not going to show you any more of the cleaning process. You got the idea already, as I said. but we will do the after. So sit tight and I'll see you in a minute. Hey everybody, this is my 125-gallon tank, and alright, and there's your after. So quite a difference tonight. So I've taken the camera off the tripod already because I want to get up close to the tank and get a good look at a few details. I really went in there and just went at it tonight. If you're familiar with my videos, if you've been a long-time viewer, you probably saw that coming from the middle section of the video where I got in there and pulled so many chunks of the Java fern and everything out. Sometimes once I get going, I really just get going and I really thin the tank out dramatically, and that's what I did tonight. In addition to what you saw me take out, I also got in there and I removed 2 other huge wads of the Java fern. This piece here was growing on a root in the back, or the roots I should say were rooted in the back, sort of between, I know it's kind of hard to tell, but this piece of wood right here is like wishbone shaped, and the catfish right there is actually sort of in the wide mouth forked end of the wishbone, and the top end is the narrow end. So the other side, it sort of straddles that rock right there, that leaning rock, and the other side is where that fern was tucked in. So the root system came all the way out, wrapped all the way around the wood, and was actually flowing across the front of the tank. And so I pulled all that out, I pulled all those roots out, and I wound up just tucking a couple small pieces of Java fern back in and taking that huge mass out and putting it in the other room in the bucket. So we removed everything in the middle here, and all we've got left is the Wendetti, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, but that's Java fern, and it's got those real sort of fingery little ends on it. So I put some in there a long time ago when I set this tank up and sort of tucked it into a couple little notches in the wood, and it's been in there this whole time. It's been kind of hiding underneath the other fern that I have always come along and tucked between the wood and the rock right there, and that's always held it in place, and that's where you saw that big flowing mass of roots. That was all coming from that regular old Java fern. And then this is actually attached to the wood. It's the roots have grown onto the wood. Poor little catfish doesn't have any big old bush to hide underneath anymore, so he'll get used to it. And I'll address all that in a minute for all of those of you out there who are shocked and shaking your head and thinking it looked so much better before. I know. Again, we'll get to that in a moment. So this end is the interesting end. This end is where I want to talk most about it. For one thing, we had the same deal here with the Java fern, huge mass of it. So now I have 3 huge masses in the bucket in the other room. And I will say that I went ahead and got the bucket set up with the ChemiClean. I've got 2 big scoops in the buckets, which is 4 times the normal dose, and I've got my big air stone in there with the massive 40-gallon tank air pump going on it. And so I am treating the Java fern that we took out of this tank in the bucket. So again, if you're interested in it, I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I am treating it in hopes that we can knock that stuff out of there for the most part. Maybe if you want to treat it again when you get it to your place or whatever, that would be up to you. I would recommend it personally. Anyway, moving on. Same thing, pulled a huge mass out, tucked a little bit back in, and when I pulled the big mass out, I immediately identified the odd sort of dead fish smell that I've been smelling for the last week or so down here. I'm not really sure where it was coming from. I've looked and looked and looked and checked all the tanks, and it was a very, very dead Congo tetra in the middle of that mass of fern. And yes, I did rinse all that fern out and get it all washed out and everything before I put it in the bucket, so don't worry, it's not going to smell like a dead fish. But I did have a dead fish in there, I didn't even know it. So that's another point we'll get to, I hope, in a moment. If you'll notice down here, recently I planted this Aponogeton. You can see it's growing like a weed, even though it's got stuff growing on it, and it's all kind of funky looking, and it's not the prettiest condition at the moment. You can see it's all leggy and growing up to the top of the tank. I've even got babies in the other room that I've taken off of this already. But behind all that, I never really noticed how good my sword is doing back there. And if you look, you can even see I've got new shoots and new growth, and the rhizome has got new roots growing off of it. So this end of this rhizome is doing really well. I do have some fern that's attached to the wood right there, so we can sort of start letting that little piece grow back in. And I've got some Anubias that I'd sort of forgotten about back there, and it's not doing great, but it's still doing okay, and it's green, and it's still growing and alive, and now that it's going to get a little more light on it, it might actually sort of perk up and do better. And most importantly, I'm really happy to say that my red tiger lotus has established. I noticed that a week ago. I wanted to do a video about it, but I decided I was going to wait till I actually shot some official video in this tank. And in the week I've been thinking about it, these two leaves have gotten fairly large and you know, obviously easily distinguishable as my red tiger lotus. And we've got some new shoots down there at the bottom. So very happy about that. That's going to look good. I had it in this tank a long time ago, and then it suddenly died off, and I know it does that occasionally, but it never came back. It just died off, and that was the end of it. So now I've got some established in here again, and I'm really happy about that. So for all of those of you out there who were saying, oh, the tank looks so good and it was so lush and green and beautiful, I know it really was, but it's just, you can't keep it that way. It's just not tenable. If you notice how much of that green filth and gross and nastiness stuff was in there, you know, as I was cleaning the tank out, I got to thinking that I should probably treat this tank for the cyanobacteria as well. You know, now that I've got it stripped out like this and I've got it beaten back a little bit, I should probably just go ahead and bite the bullet, because it'll take a lot to treat a 125-gallon tank. It's a scoop for every 10 gallons, you know. So I got to thinking about it, and I realized I've never treated this tank for that green cyanobacteria, despite having it in here pretty much since this tank's been established. And I thought about why that is, and it's because of the routine. It's because of what we just did. The reason that stuff starts developing is because of low water circulation, poor gas exchange, low light, low oxygen levels. That's what that stuff thrives in, and that's what I was providing it with. So by getting in there from time to time and really opening this tank up, letting the water flow again, letting the light in, letting good gas exchange happen on the surface, it just really disrupts the habitat and the environment for that stuff to grow, and it just kind of goes away a little bit until the tank starts getting a little thick and overgrown. So, you know, for all that stuff I knocked loose and was flowing around the tank, I like how well my little chocolate zebra pleco is hiding, tucked into that rock right there. He is really wedged in there. So for all that stuff that got knocked loose and all the stuff that was still in there and growing on everything, because I never really did get in there with the siphon and go back, I really just kind of got distracted by pulling the huge masses of fern and everything out of there. Speaking of fern, I got a little bit of new growth. I'm not sure what kind of fern this is. It's some kind of Java, but I'm not sure, and I've got some new growth on that, which I didn't realize because it was buried in the roots of all that water sprite that was floating over top of it. So despite all that, and here's a good example, if you'll look, you can see that green on the end of the wood right there, and you can see some dark green bits down there. That's all that green stuff. Again, I'm assuming it's cyanobacteria. I've been told by some people that it's not. It's some species of algae, but I've been told by just about everybody else that it is cyanobacteria. It's slimy. It comes off in sheets. You know, that to me has just always been cyanobacteria. So we'll see if that doesn't go crazy in the tank now. Excuse me. Or if, as I said, I've changed the conditions in the tank to the point where it's not going to thrive, and I don't have to worry about getting in there and doing a lot of fighting it back and putting treatment in the tank and everything. I did treat the tank, but I treated it by changing the environment. I opened it up, I gave it some water flow, I let light back in. That's going to let the gas exchange happen and reoxygenate the water and get it all nice and well oxygenated, and that's just poor conditions for that stuff to live. So let's see what happens. And lastly, I'll say, you know, as far as looks go, you know, sometimes they say a change is as good as a rest, or change is as good as a vacation, however that saying goes. I will also say, to me, it's like a haircut. You know, getting all upset about it's kind of silly. It'll grow back. You know, I have to do this on a regular basis. You know, I'm used to gardening and doing stuff like that, so for me, waiting a few months to have my tank back in is not that big a deal. I'm used to putting seeds in the ground in the autumn, and I don't see them again till the following summer, if I even remember I planted them half the time. So just allowing this tank to grow back in over the course of a few months is no sweat for me. It's just nice to see it open and bright, and over time it'll fill back in and all this stuff will grow in, and fortunately we'll now give a chance for this stuff, this Wendetti or whatever it's called, to really grow in and give it a chance to shine and do its thing as a star of the tank for a little while, because it's definitely different than all the other Java that I've got in here. So there you go. That's my before and after good long look at the work I did in my 125 gallon tank tonight. So make sure you're subscribed, that way you won't miss anything I got coming up. You never know what it's going to be with me. And don't forget, of course, as I just said, this is my 125 gallon tank. So thanks for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.